You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. This is Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. There are latest things that makes it official. The Chris Voss Show is live. 16 years, 2,100 episodes, all that great stuff. And eventually the audience just finally caught on that they should jump into the show. But gotta love the timing of the internet there. So welcome to the show. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss1, the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. Today, we have an amazing young man on the show. We're going to be talking about his new book that came out June 15th, 2024, called 1 Mile at a Time, which is how we did 16 years and 2,100 episodes. Edward R. Rahill joins us on the show with us today. He is going to be talking about his amazing experience and insights in his new book. He is a Notre Dame graduate and successful energy sector veteran, and is not just a businessman, but a record-holding endurance road racer with the fastest cross-country time from Boston to San Diego. His fascination with road racing sparked as a boy watching the 1966 24 Hours of Le Mans. The publication of his debut book, 1 Mile at a Time, fulfills a commitment to his grandmother to break the cycle of unfulfilled dreams for his children's generation. Currently residing in Atlanta, Georgia, he's a father of 4 adult children, continues to resemble resilience and ambition, setting sights on his next venture. Welcome to the show, Ed. How are you?
Just thank you, and thank you to your audience for being here.
Thanks for coming.
I appreciate it.
It's good to have you. So give us the .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the
My web page is Edward Rahill, RAHIL.com. And I have basically author Edward Rahill on Facebook and author Edward Rahill on Instagram. So we have some very good sites there. And of course, the book is available at Barnes & Noble and amzn.to. So we're pretty pleased. We have an ebook that just came out. I'm in the process of getting the book translated into Spanish and getting an audio book out the first quarter of next year. Mm-hmm. And then that's when we're gonna start our really push for marketing the product. But we're excited about it. I'm excited to have the opportunity to be here and talk about it.
We're excited to have you. Congratulations. So give us a 30,000 overview of what's inside the book.
It operates at 2 different levels. We can talk about why I've taken the path to market it this way. The book on the surface really recounts the last great American road race ever run, called the 4-Ball Rally. There were 4 of them in the 80s, and it marked the end of a tradition in American history that went all the way back to 1860. Mm-hmm. And so there's a little bit in the beginning, I give a history of where this whole concept of endurance road racing came from. It had European roots, but in America, it really only started to get noticed in 1860 with the Pony Express. Now, the Pony Express was not a race, but it was an attempt to ride across the continental United States as fast as he could to deliver the mail. And we all know that the Pony Express ended with the beginning of the Civil War and the tragedy that was. But afterwards, there was a tremendous expansion into the West, and the cowboy concept of person was born. An independent person who owned his horse, owned his gun, owned his equipment and clothes, and would travel from spot to spot to earn a living. Mm-hmm. And this culture just loved the idea of cross-continental road racing. The average horse race starting in the 1870s was about 1,000 miles. And the last great American road race is called the Great Road Race of Horse Race of 1893, in which riders rode on their own, choosing their own course and how to get there, a 1,000-mile trek to Chicago at the time when the World's Fair was occurring then, and that Buffalo Bill Cody had his Wild West show. And of course, being the marketer that Cody was, he offered a gold-plated Colt 45 to the winner of the race, and the award was made.
Oh, wow. There you go. And so this has been going on. Now, everyone remembers the movie Cannonball Run.
Mm-hmm.
Was Cannonball Run based on this?
The in name and probably only Cannonball Run, and let's I'm going to go back a little bit more history, but we'll go straight in that. Brock Yates, who was a hero of mine, editor of Car and Driver, started the Cannonball Run in 1971 as the beginning of the protest that he personally had against restrictive road, basically laws, including 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. That was something it was a passion for him, and we all know that it became a big passion for Americans. The old rock songs, "I Can't Drive 55."
Sammy Hagar.
But he drove from New York to Portofino Hotel in L.A. about 2,700 miles, and he did with about 7 other cars, and he basically set the whole stage going again. But the race had decades behind it. In 1905, and you look at the forward in my book, I'm standing in front of the monument erected by the state of Oregon to honor the race. And for two gentlemen that, basically in 1905 took a 44-day trek from New York to Portland and won the first cross-continental road race, and that is what that plaque represents, that the state set up. And they came in 4 days ahead of the next team member. So it was it continued to develop from a horse race to a kart race.
Oh, wow.
And the Cannonball Baker is a genuine human being who basically prided in driving cross country as fast as he could in the 20s and 30s. And he was an amazing man, and that's where Brock Yates got the idea for Cannonball Run.
Oh, wow.
Because he was honoring the races that had occurred previously.
And was he was a motorcycle racer?
He got his first notice as a motorcycle racer. He ended up being president of NASCAR in his older age, but he graduated from motorcycles to automobiles. And that was where the Cannonball Baker occurred when he arrived from LA into New York City driving Bears, I think a Stutz Bearcat. And one of the New York Times or Post reporters basically, gave him a nickname, Cannonball Baker. It's about honor the train that would never, that didn't stop for anybody.
There you go. The train that didn't stop for anybody. I was a fan of that movie, and boy, I mean, there's so many great actors in those things. But I always wanted the black Camaro.
You're thinking about Trans Am, Smokey and the Bandit, perhaps?
Yeah, Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah.
That car. That's the one I'm thinking of, yeah. I can't remember if it was in Cannonball Run. Evidently it wasn't. But they had a bunch of crazy cars, I think, if I remember. So tell us about your life. How do you get down this road, I always say. But so there it is. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying. I'm going to kind of explain this in a kind of a concise form. The book has two levels in it. The racing developed, which is a true story, and the documentation of. I have 72 different newspapers in the back of the book, documenting that I accomplished what I did, including the New York Times, Chicago Sun-Times, UPI. Back then they had UPI as well as AP. So the race is something that you go on the internet, you find out that I did it. But that wasn't why I wrote this book. I wrote this book basically to as a letter to my 4 children, to basically to explain to them who I am, because I realized I had been so dedicated to my career, and starting up a company and becoming CEO of it and selling it, that I don't think I spent enough time telling them about me. They, at that point, knew nothing about me prior to my marrying their mother.
Oh, wow.
And this whole book is part of that. And so it was an attempt for me to do an outreach, to be the father I should have been, that I wanted to be.
There you go.
And it was only then that, after asking for some very close friends to review it, I came back, this thing is a manuscript, guy. You got to change your whole focus on this. And one thing led to another. I ended up befriending a gentleman named Brian O'Shea, was an adopted son of Truman Capote.
Oh,
And
wow.
he got the whole thing, and I shared it with him. He was in Hollywood at a party, and he called me up. He said, "We have two producers who want to come out and talk to you about this right now."
Uh-huh.
And that got me going a little bit. The book was really only in concept, and I called an attorney, basically a media attorney, and she said, "Don't you dare to talk to these guys." Says all they want to do is take the concept,
And
because
run
at
with it.
that time that I was doing this, Ford versus Ferrari was a big hit around
Oh,
the
yeah.
world, and they were looking for the next car hit. He
Mhm.
said, but what they're going to do is they're going to buy the title,
Mhm.
and they're going to buy your name, and then they're going to write whatever they want.
Yeah. That's
And
kind
I
of how
said,
Hollywood
that's
seems to
not the
work.
reason I wrote the book.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And it really, the underlying theme that really underwrites the entire book and comes to a head at the end is that it's really a story about the human race and humans, and how we are but members of what I call a relay, the relay team race of life.
Mhm.
It's a race where there are runners before you who run their lives, run the best they can,
Mhm.
but as they come towards the end of their turn, they suddenly realize that they have progeny they need to pass this knowledge on to,
Mhm.
that transfer is made to you, and then
Mhm.
you run your life and live it the best you can, mistakes and victories. But there comes a time when we got to start thinking about what's our impact on the future of the human race, because we have the ability to do that.
Mhm.
The only reason we're not living in caves is because one generation after another got smarter and smarter and smarter by learning, from previous generations.
Mhm.
And so
Wait,
I tell the story about how that worked for me.
you guys aren't living in caves anymore? I'm still
Well,
practicing from a
I am.
cave.
No, in Georgia, we've graduated from that.
Oh,
We've just gotten over Sherman down
oh.
here, so
We're still
we.
in we're still in caves here in Utah, evidently. So, which explains a lot, I
Those are
suppose.
good for EMP
Yeah.
security reasons. We can get into
Well,
that. That's a separate company of mine.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just had to get that joke in there. Go ahead.
Oh, it's a good joke. But the long story is that I start out telling about how the race it became part of American culture
Hmm.
for 100, 120 years.
Yeah.
And then I graduate to my life and what, how I grew up, and I was raised by my grandmother, and she treated me very much like a son.
Hmm.
I lived with her, and it was she spent a lot of time telling me and preparing me for things. 7, 8, 9 years old. What do you mean I have to be prepared for when times go bad? I didn't know what bad times were, other than I had a fight in grade school or something.
Uh-huh.
And so it was her. She influenced me to the point that in the book you're going to see a point that is dead true. We were broken down in Illinois. I had been arrested twice,
Oh boy.
one in New York, and taken to court. This is in the middle of the race.
Hmm.
And
Oh,
then
in the
the
middle of the
second,
race. Wow.
oh yeah, I was handcuffed by the New York State Police
Wow.
because they couldn't lock on radar because we had radar jamming equipment. The car was running stealth.
It was back when it was
Second,
illegal. Huh?
the next thing is that's a federal law, not a state law. They can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And then the second thing was that they look for your tollway ticket. We tossed that the second we got it to see your timestamp. And they went in and illegally searched the car and found a Bearcat scanner. You know what those are? They listen to
Uh-huh.
frequencies from radios.
Yeah.
Handcuffed my car. That's why I go in, taken in front of a judge. And the way that ended, it's a funny story how it goes. She's basically dressed in a summer dress saying, I have to go to a wedding in a couple of hours, so let's get to it. And the trooper made the case that they had found a radio scanner where they had been listening to their broadcasts, and that was a violation of police safety. And she looked at me and asked me what I thought. And I'm standing with handcuffs behind me, okay? And I said to her, Your Honor, under the 1934 Congressional Act about radio broadcasts, is that every American citizen is allowed to listen to any radio broadcast in the country. They're just not allowed to broadcast without a license.
Oh.
And she basically looked at me, eyes open wide. She looked at the trooper, looked back, smiled, cracking ear to ear. He's right. Get him back to his car now. And there was a lot of events like that are kind of funny. The funniest one is I get arrested in Ohio by Ohio State Trooper for an illegal lane change. And let's put it this way. We had an awards banquet 2 months later. He shows up with his wife to get his award.
Oh my God.
I mean, these are all true stories.
Wow.
And it really was an adventure we called life.
Yeah. In today's world, illegal lane changes, I know some people on the road that would be on death row over illegal lane changes.
He said, technically, he asked me to step back to his car. I had the license and registration out the window, so he saw hands. And he said, he was walking to the car. Hey, Mr. Rahill, get out of your car, come back to mine. How the hell he know who I was? And it turned out he showed me. I have a copy of it in the book. An all points bulletin across the entire United States, warning every trooper in the country that we're coming, and they were all preparing. He said, "Yeah, this is my day off. I volunteered for this when I heard about it."
Holy crap!
Yeah.
Wow. So you guys, they were looking for you.
But he started laughing after he said, "I know this. Hey, Ed, I just want you to know, nothing personal, but I was trying to find a way to get arrest you, but my radar gun said 56." But I've been doing this for 15 years. You're moving all, you're doing 120. He was right. And he said, I couldn't figure out how I could legally arrest you until you pulled off the road to wait for me without using your turn signal. Not using my turn signal was the violation.
Wow. And
he smiled. He says, Ed, this is a little bit like Monopoly. You're going to lose one turn. So I'm going to hold you for another 30 minutes and I'm going to let you go.
What?
And he had a real sense of humor about it. He was a great guy. And in the back of the book, I show a picture of me, Tim, and Roger standing there with a cake honoring the victory and his award as Super Trooper of the Year. I mean, it was a time when police were allowed to be more human than they are today.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming police. Today they're under an autocratic system where they have to look for a reason to write you a ticket. Mm-hmm. If you ever been pulled over, what does the officer first say to you? Do you know why I stopped you? Mm-hmm. Or do you know why I pulled you over? That's part of an interrogation technique to find out if there's something else going on he can cite you on. And he's ordered to use those words.
Wow.
So it's not that he's trying to be a jerk. He's not at all. Mm-hmm. And when he's off duty, he'd be a guy you have a beer with and have a pizza. No problem at all. It's just that the system is becoming very inhuman in how we deal with police enforcement and the average citizen and traffic enforcement.
So it's a great metaphor for life, 1 mile at a time, and what you're trying to leave behind your legacy to your children and stuff like that. Now this is they don't do this race anymore. You raced the last series of the race. We were the last one. I didn't know it, but it came to a head. And it came to a head in the United States because the year before I also ran the race. NBC Nightly News implanted a reporter with us, Douglas Tiker, that name you may have heard, did the entire section, and they covered point to point, Boston, San Diego, the entire race. They had a 6-minute segment out of their 22-minute broadcast on it to give you an idea. And Brokaw was still alive. He was doing it, and they were laughing about it, and and said about the traffic tickets and everything. But that showed a different attitude in the country towards adventurism, independence, and free spirit. Yeah, it's what this country was built on.
Exactly. And I'm trying to explain to people the 20th century why we went from a bunch of insignificant, horse riding cowboys in the 1860s to becoming the most dominant society in the world by 1880 and by 1990 and 2000. And my premise is that it was because of the way people came to this country and viewed their lives, they're responsible for their lives, and they're responsible for making something of themselves. Yesterday, I just did a podcast, an international one, headquartered in Dubai, India. And they were asking me questions about American society and how did you get here and all that. And I used these analogies to explain it to him. And he was trying to understand. I said, we still have it today. I said, do you know Elon Musk is an immigrant?
Yeah.
And he just opened his eyes. I said, but it's something that you get the most growth and development out of individualism rather than centralized government. That was the point I was making.
Really, it's true. You know, when I was a teenager, I was looking at, or an early businessman, I was looking at, I grew up looking at Russia and America, and there was a competition back then of who, had the best form of government and the best spirit, I guess you'd say, for their people. And, I just realized that, with communism, everyone gets the same check. It's a death of the human spirit. No matter how hard you work, you get the same. And there's no real recognition for excelling or working hard or making a difference. And in America, there is. And that's really the secret sauce to America, is that having that freedom and having that ability to, technically there's kind of no limit on how high you can go. And the human spirit flourishes in that environment where, in a contained, you can only go so far environment, it kills the human spirit. So
it flourishes and society flourishes.
Yeah.
Because society is composed of individuals.
Yeah.
When we view a society as a collective, you're taking away individuals' personal responsibility. I don't have to worry about that beggar on the street. The government will take care of. That's what centralized socialism does. It takes away the individual responsibility for their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to work hard because I'm going to get guaranteed whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that was something I was trying to say. When my grandmother was married to this is where my grandmother, she's important to the story.
Mm-hmm.
Her mother came over from Ireland at Ellis Island in the 1880s. At 14 years old, had a job and taken to Buffalo, New York, where she was the maid on Delaware Avenue. And she spent her entire career as the maid in that home.
Mm-hmm.
She did get married and had several children, among which was my grandmother, Anne. And they had a tough life. At 5th grade, my grandmother had to leave school to go to work to help support the family.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Her job was to walk the railroad yards in South Buffalo to pick up free coal to sell. And she told me that was considered a good job.
Wow.
And so she got to that point. And when we come to the chain of broken dreams and her trying to get me to try to break that chain,
mm-hmm.
She basically had her dream. She had 4 children. She was a stay-at-home mom. My grandfather was 36 and just a go-getter. Convinced Ford Motor to give him a dealership. 2 years later, he dies of appendicitis.
Oh, wow.
And the business is barely breaking even because it's a startup.
Mm-hmm.
And she has no education, doesn't know very little about the automobile business. 4 kids that she has to feed. There's no welfare. There's none of that going on. And to compound it, 2 weeks later, Ford sent out their district manager and said, we're going to have to reauthorize the franchise to a man who knows how to run this.
Mm-hmm.
And taking that away from her. And in the book, I can explain how to do it, but I'll say the crescendo for her. I have a copy of the telegram sent from Detroit from Ford to her, congratulating her on being a dealer of the year, and then copying all the other dealerships in upstate New York, saying, and this is exactly what the senior vice president said. I'm starting to think what we need to do to get results is to hire more single mothers with 4 kids to run these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 18 months after they were trying to take it away from her. And I talk a lot about what she did in those 18 months to make it happen, but it was tenacity, never giving up. We're not, I don't care how many times you get knocked down, you get back up. The resiliency and that's the character she was trying to show me by explaining her life when she would talk to me. And the reason why I have the story of the race became so prominent, it was going back to my young childhood in the middle of the night in Illinois. my partner had passed out from exhaustion, literally, and
Wow.
and looking to give up. And it was going back with those memories that caused me to say, screw it. I don't give a damn. I'm going to do this 1 mile at a time. I had 2,000 miles to go, and I was going to do it 1 mile at a time. And that's where the impetus of the book came from.
Mm-hmm.
And I just drove like a bat out of hell. From I think from St. Louis to Adrian, Texas, I averaged about 128 miles an hour.
Holy.
And from Illinois to San Diego, including construction and all the problems you have with slowing things down, the traffic averaged 104. That's with all those stops included in that.
Wow.
And I never knew I was going to win. It was just all about keeping the faith that I at least did not give up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, we came close, and 30 cars started and only 11 finished. A lot of them gave up because this was the most aggressive national police enforcement in the country that had never been done before.
Yeah.
We were, I mean, they were tracking us. They knew who we were. It was it really was an exhausting experience.
Against the establishment.
It was.
Breaking the rules.
I had a rule back when we were still seriously running the race, never run a police car. That rule was broken in Southern California against the helicopters, a Chip Bell 206. And it was quite an experience because we ran that thing and we got it. We won that run. And next thing you know, we're in San Diego at 5 o'clock at the hotel and I'm driving in with Tim. Oh, Tim, he wakes up. So he says, "Can I drive the car in?" Because, he wanted to. I said, "Sure." He proceeds to speed up the ramp too fast. The brakes are shot and he drives into a telephone pole. And so I'm there bitching at him. "This is my car, you son of a bitch."
Shit.
And all of a sudden I look over, there's all these vans and TV cameras and about 120 people cheering with drinks in their hands. That we were the first ones in. I didn't know that. And it was by 10 minutes, by the way. If I had backed off even for 10 more minutes to feel sorry for myself back in Missouri, never would have won the thing.
Wow. What a
That's
story
that close.
Perseverance and doing 10 minutes. I mean, sometimes that's the difference between winning and coming in second. It's just the timing.
And that's a lesson in life. Really, there are many times in your life, and I examine mine, where there have been other 10 minutes over 3,000 miles that made a difference.
Oh, yeah.
And I have failed at times. I'm a human being. At times I just say, "What the hell?" And I wake up about it, says, if I had just pushed a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But I take that as a learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I'm hoping to pass that knowledge on to my kids. And the reason why I'm going to see that I can get this to be a movie is I'd like to make a statement to other Americans of what we were and what we could be again.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point, is that we need to understand that it all comes down to you as an individual. And my grandmother had 100 sayings. A lot of them are in the back of the book in a quote section. But she used to tell me, Mick, my middle name is Michael. She calls me Mick. You need to understand something. You need to take care of yourself in life because you can't take care of the ones you love if you don't. And I mean, those are the types of knowledge she had to take care of herself so she could save the business. And the kids grew up without her around, but she had to do what she had to do to save the business, to save the family.
Yeah.
And there's other things that are kind of interesting that we could get into sometime. But she had that tremendous impact because she had the vision in her life to try to be that baton holder, handing off the baton to me so that I learned what she learned, what she went through, the mistakes she made, and how she fixed it. And that is the kind of thing I feel I think we're losing that in this country. And I'm kind of hoping that we can get it back. And so the race is a metaphor for that. Mm-hmm. But it is filled with a lot of funny and amazing things that even when I look back today, I have to go back, look at some of the newspaper articles back then just to reconfirm it all happened.
There you go. You were there. It happened. And you won. As we go out, give people a final pitch out on where to buy the book, where to find out more on your website, the .com, all that good stuff.
Thank you, Chris. The book is 1 Mile at a Time by Edward Rahill, Rahill. It can be found on Amazon, and your bookstore will have it in their file if they don't have it in stock. Mm-hmm. My webpage is edwardrahill.com. The Facebook and Instagram social media, which I've had some excellent help on, is author.edwardrahill.com. Within those two platforms, I am in the process of looking for a national PR firm that I want to employ to try to get the book marketed in a way that I feel it should be. Mm-hmm. And also it's a stepping stone for me to be able to have negotiating power about a potential movie going forward. It's not that I don't deny them that they can go and change and make things. You can't take this whole book and put it into 90 or 120 minutes. You're going to have to cut stuff out. But I want the message that there's a fortitude that happens, and there's an existence. Our success very often has something to do with the people who came before us.
Definitely.
And that's the message.
There you go. Thank you very much for coming on the show. It sounds like a fun read and a great capture of a time in life that, I don't know, maybe we should do it again. We should start this race, do an annual one again. You ever thought about trying to get one? Maybe they let you?
Let me, I still am like to get an amateur racing, but like with Skip Barber or One Lap, they do one in an Atlanta race course we have down here. But I've got to be honest with myself. I mean, that in my 68 Shelby, 500, I missed some shifts now that I never would have missed when I was 30. and I just got to be honest about whether I would want to do it again. Not because the amount of energy and perseverance in this book, after I had completed my almost 1,000-mile run by myself, averaging 128, it took 6-7 hours. In Le Mans, they switch every 4 hours because it's too exhausting. I literally had to be lifted out of the car seat by my partner and put into the passenger seat because I had nothing left. Wow. The legs were like jelly.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there quivering. But the amount of adrenaline I had applied to make that race happen and put us back into it was something I was able to do at 30. I can't do it now. And so I don't want to compete against those guys. It's for somebody else, the next generation, to do it.
I think you should oversee it. Like maybe
I would love to help that, but we need to understand. Just like I said, the message of the book is we need to hand off the baton.
Yeah,
I'm hoping that this book encourages some people, whether it's doing a race or going and trying to start a business, or taking a chance on something like that, to have the courage to go do it, and understanding, if you don't make a change in your life, nothing's going to change.
That's true.
But if you take a chance, it just might change.
Yeah.
And guess what? What's the worst thing that can happen? You don't make it, and you're disappointed and sad about the fact that it didn't work out. But you're probably right back to where you were if you didn't try at all.
That's true. And sometimes it's all about that timing. I remember one time we were going to change the name to our mortgage company it was Ace Mortgage, and we started that for the first 30 days, and we didn't. No one was happy with the name, and so I was like, "Fuck it!" And so we came up with Park Place Mortgage, and it was available, and it's a great name because Boardwalk, Park Place Mortgage.
Yeah.
And I walked in very early in the morning, as soon as they opened, to register the name of the company, the new name of the company, Park Place Mortgage. A week or two later, we got a letter from the Department of, we had all this stuff printed up, and I was really excited to have the name. We got a letter from the Department of Business Licensing that someone had beat us to the punch by a half an hour and had submitted the name, and therefore it was no longer ours, it was theirs. And so at first I was like, ready to give up and go, fuck it, we got screwed there. But then I was like, wait, I was there at the open. I was there when the gate went up. And so I challenged it, and I had my timestamp and their timestamp, and I went to the thing and said, hey, and it was by like 10 minutes. And I had beaten them to the punch. And it turns out it was ours and not theirs.
You were at 10 minutes.
Yeah. It went down to, it was like 10 or 15 minutes or something, if I recall. It was really close. It was like minutes. And that they'd walked in behind me, and somebody had chosen the wrong victor. And, there's lots of, what are some other examples? Some other examples of minutes are, I think, wasn't there a person who walked in with the patent for the phone, but he was, a little bit later than Graham Bell?
Yes. Oh, my God. You're catching. That's the kind of stuff I remember from history. Yeah. I learned that about 30 years ago.
Yeah. And these are
that's really, maybe when we write a book is connections and how lessons in life about how just a moment in time makes a difference.
Yeah. Timing is everything.
Yep.
That's what my girlfriend says all the time. Anyway, thank you for coming on the show. We certainly appreciate it. And it's been insightful and fun read. And harking me back to the great days of Cannonball Run and those Firebirds, that black Firebird and gold Firebird that was... Now, you did the second run in a Camaro, did you not? Or
no, I did it in a Pontiac Firebird, the brand new one that I had a 78 I built myself.
Is that
the next one was a brand new one I bought that...
It looks like a Camaro. That's what's so cool.
Camaros and Pontiac. It's a gray car in the book. If you go through the little bit, I have a picture of it. The car was part of my deal with General Motors Proving Grounds to basically buy a GM car, and if I bought the right one, they were going to build it for me, so it looked like an average car, but it was not. And I mean, it had a 2.99 drag coefficient. Porsches today don't have 2.99. That's the amount of drag of the car going through the wind.
Huh.
I mean, its body was designed for 200 miles an hour.
Wow.
We never got above 180, but the point, and I really didn't ever want to, because comes a point where a car can go airborne on you.
Yeah.
They turn into an airplane.
Yeah.
And so I've always felt it wasn't about getting the needle to 200. It was about making sure we get past the guy we're trying to beat.
Yeah.
And so that but I'm sorry, I digressed. But this has been fun, and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Folks, pick up the book wherever fine books are sold out June 15th, 2024. It's called 1 Mile at a Time. Edward M. Rahill has been on the show with us today. Thanks for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss, one of the TikTok and Ellen's crazy places on the internet. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.